Everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and another episode of On a Technicality. And today we're going to be taking a look at is how to wire up your JVS board controls, because it is completely different than JAMMA, and you guys have been asking me about it, so I'm definitely going to help you out and show you how I do it. Before we get too far involved though, if you could do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. It really helps us out. And if you feel so inclined, we got a Patreon link down there as well if you want to support the channel and see more tutorials like this. But JVS is not like JAMMA whatsoever, because on a JVS board, you need an I/O board or an input-output board. And you'll see here we're using this Tucson Logic. It is a device made by a member of the Neo Geo forums, and it connects via USB into the Sega NAOMI board. This isn't a review of that Tucson Logic board. It works perfectly fine, and maybe I'll do a review soon. But you'll see here on a JAMMA Edge, all your button inputs are going to go over the JAMMA Edge as well as other things. But on JVS, those inputs are going to go through that I/O board. We have the I/O board in USB, we have stereo out, we have VGA, and we have power going in. So all JVS is just taking the different components of what was on the JAMMA Edge and it's breaking them out into their own separate components. But because that is in fact the case, we need to use something like an I/O board to be able to send signals into that NAOMI. And basically how it works is there's these pin headers here, and there's a power switch, there's a coin button, things you can wire up, and then you have USB power in and the USB I/O out. But it just allows you to hook up different buttons or systems or sticks into that board. And on the bottom it has a really nice silk screened pin out, so you don't have to worry about keeping any paperwork near you. So it tells you what you have for players, and it has all your different inputs. And the way you connect things to this is very simple, and we'll go over that soon, but there is no logic between the button to the I/O board. The I/O board converts that logic to the JVS system with the chip on top. But just showing you a close-up here, it has all the connections you're going to need to be able to play any non-light gun or driving game, and the maker of this has a custom firmware that you can put analog pot values in so you can drive. But you'll see here I have a 24-pin ribbon cable, and it's going to have too many connections for this board, but I had it sitting around, so why not use it? And you'll see here that just taking a look at player 1, it slots right in there. It's not keyed, and we do need to work on that a little bit, but it's a really easy way to make that connection. And this entire tutorial is so that all these parts can be taken apart and put away when you're not using them, because we don't want to direct wire a ribbon cable into a stick. So what you need here is you just need your side cutters, because we need to pop one end of this ribbon cable off. And always cut it right at the top, because we don't know how much slack we're going to need and we don't want to lose material. So always, if you're cutting cables like this, just make sure you leave as much usable material as possible. So if you do need to trim a little bit more, you're not getting too short. And that connector is useless now. I'm not even going to save it, and I save everything. But what I'm going to do is just take a label maker, or you can use a piece of paper and tape, and I'm just going to demarcate on that connector what end goes towards the outside edge of the board. Just because we want to make sure we plug it in correctly every single time. We don't want to be sending the signals the wrong place and not having it work. So in lieu of having a key that we can use, we're just going to use that label. And what I did here is I just wrote the entire pinout of this board onto a piece of paper, so I have to keep spinning it back and forth. This is going to allow me to keep track of where all my connections go into the stick, because the pin on the I/O board is going to be different. But you'll see here this ribbon cable, they can be a little bit temperamental. What I do is I just use my fingernails and try to get in between each lead and just sort of move my fingernail back and forth until I'm able to peel it back. Don't use tools, they're very fine pitch. If you have fingernails, even if you trim them, it's going to work for you. And then from there, all I will do is bring in my wire strippers on the smallest setting, and I'll just take a little bit of that insulation off so that I'm able to expose the copper inside of it, because that's what we're going to need to deal with. And just to make sure that that works, I use my multimeter, I put one end on the pin and the other on the bare wire, and I know that I've got a good connection all the way through the bottom of that pin into my ribbon cable, so that when I connect it to the next part in the tutorial, I know my signal's at least going that far. And I like to check continuity at each stage, that way I know if there's a mistake or there's an issue, I'll catch it early versus having to try to figure out where it goes. And all I'll do is just basically on the entire ribbon cable, as I've peeled them back, I will mark off when I know I have continuity, and I'll do it all the way down the line. That way I know every single lead you see here has tested good, and I'll be ready for the next stage. Because I can't stress it enough, find the problem early, don't find it late, because trying to track down the problem in the end is going to be a large pain in the butt. And you'll see here, we do have common ground, so we know that's a feature that we can use so that when we're grounding our different buttons out, we don't have to worry about what ground they're going to. But taking a look inside of the stick here, I made a mistake in my own logic. I had a pinout written down for this stick and I should have put it in the case and I forgot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to connect those bare wires we saw into that DB15 port so I can marry them together with the stick itself. And having gone through and done the entire pinout, I now know pin 1 on the IO device is pin 15 on DB15. So I've made a pin-to-pin conversion map so I know where everything needs to go. And the reason I'm doing this is that way I can use this stick on my Neo Geo, I can use it on my Supergun for JAMMA, and I can use it on my JVS setup. Because I like making one thing work for multiple purposes, because I live in a condo, I don't have that much space, and I don't want to make a custom stick every time I have a new device. I want one thing that'll work across as many devices as I have. So you'll see inside of this DB15 port, you don't have to solder into the cups. It is what they call field termination. That just means it uses screw posts. Don't put it on your table and move it around. Those solder pads are going to scratch it. So I put it on a notepad. That way I don't do any damage to my work surface because I don't have a workbench. But you'll see here, I know that pin 1 is going to go into pin 15 for the stick. So I'm going to use that screwdriver and open up pin 15. And all I'm going to do is slot wire 1 or pin 1 on the JVS IO into pin 15 onto the DB15 port. So when I plug it into the arcade stick, pin 15 is going to go to pin 1, which is where we need it to go. And we're going to follow this all the way down the line until we have all those connections placed in. And just to give you a close-up, dealing with pin 7 here on the DB15 port, I think my hand gets in the way a little bit, but all you do is open up that little flathead port, and then when the wire's in there, you screw it down till it pinches, and that's it. That's how you make the connection. So you can fix it, you don't need to deal with solder. Now that we have the entire thing wired up from start to finish, we've got a couple extra pins that we didn't need there for our setup, those little leads, but we'll just leave those there because we may add them in the future. But I've checked everything out. Everything's connected and we are good to go. And now what I will do is I will go down the line and I will check my pinout the entire way. Just like I said before, checking continuity each stage so that I know no matter what happens, the signal is going from where I need it to go to where it needs to be. So if there's any buttons missing, I'll be able to track them down. And then just putting these together, you want to make sure your wires have enough slack so you don't pinch them. So I just put that DB15 port back in the plastic housing, lightly bring my wires together, and just close it down. It's got a snap lock, and now all those wires are in there. Now this isn't a device that's made for mass manufacturing. This is for my own use, and it's not delicate, but it's also not, bomb proof. But for me, these work, and whatever, wires you want to use, you totally can. But using that keying there without, all I do is connect that back up to the IO board and everything is put together the way we need it. Those buttons are going through into the IO device. What I'm going to do now is to check one more time. I'll bring my continuity meter back in and I will test all the buttons inside of the stick to make sure that the signal from that IO board is going all the way into the stick, because we know if those signals are complete, then everything is good. I just test right to the top of the DB15 port and I know everything is 100%. What I'll do on my piece of paper is just mark them off as I test them. I'm doing it all at once now just so you can see it on the camera. And then I will just take this little piece of paper, write done on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to store it inside of the stick. That way, if I never need to work on this again, I know exactly where my pinout is. And I highly recommend that for everything. Keep a paper record so you're not trying to guess or test what you did, because you saw earlier in the video, I forgot. And obviously we don't want the stick that close to the Naomi, so I just buy these mono price DB15 male to female cables on Amazon. They're like $6 and they work perfect for all arcade use. But now that that's all wired together, all we need to do to make this work is we put one end of the USB cable into the Naomi and the other end into that Tucson Logic IO board. And like I said, not a review. I may do one in the future, but it works perfectly. So I give him a thumbs up. They've got a website. I'll link it below. I don't know how many he makes of these guys, so if he's always out of stock, don't be mad at him. Don't blame me. It's a new device, and I bought it to check it out. But that's how you wire up your stick into a Sega NAOMI. It's not the most complicated thing in the world, but it definitely is a little bit harder than doing something with JAMMA. But if you have any questions whatsoever, leave them down below and I'm happy to help, because you guys really like the how do I do my captures and how do I play JAMMA games at home, and you've asked for JVS stuff. So this is the first tutorial. We're going to have another one soon about how to power up a Sega NAOMI or a JVS board. But like I said, if you can do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, ring that notification bell, helps us out. If you want to support us on Patreon, the link's down below. Short of that, thanks so much for watching. Have a great weekend and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.